A pivot table is an interactive worksheet table. As you recall, in a previous training video, I showed you how you can go ahead and convert a database like this into a table. I'll call it a regular table. The biggest difference, or one of the major differences between a regular table and a pivot table, is that in a pivot table you can go ahead and pick and choose which columns that you would like to go ahead and filter in or pivot in and pivot out. You can see how helpful that can be, because if I just want to pull up, let's say, the company and the products that they purchased and the total amount, I don't have to hide these columns or scan back and over between these columns to be able to pull that information up quickly. Now it's really easy to go ahead and create a pivot table. Just click anywhere within your database, come up here, click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group, click on Pivot Table. It'll ask you two questions. First of all, where's your database? And select it. And you can see mine's already selected. That's why I say click in your table. If it's not selected and you can't see the marching ants around it, go ahead and click on the collapsible dialog box button. Click and drag and select it. Be sure to include your column labels. Hit enter to pop it back open. And then it says, okay, where do you want to dump your pivot table into? An existing worksheet or a new worksheet? Well, if you do an existing worksheet, I recommend that you choose one that isn't the same as your database, because that kind of defeats the purpose. If you have your pivot table next to a bunch of other data, then you have to scroll back and forth or up or down. So I'm going to go ahead and say a new worksheet, click OK, and congratulations, we now have the skeletal part of our pivot table. We have to start adding our fields, as you can see over here in the field list, by checking the boxes to give it some flesh, or to see the data that we would see over here in our database, but be able to pick and choose what fields you want to see from our database. Now there are four types of fields, from all the fields that you have listed up above, and they're displayed down below. You have your report filter, or your page, and then you have your two labels, one for the column, one for the row, and then you have your data, or your values. Now all the other fields, except for the values, typically or usually contain text values, and the values here usually contain numerical values. So when you start checking the boxes and adding the fields, it'll add them over here to the pivot table, and then basically apply them to one of these four fields down below. Usually it's the row labels and the values, sometimes the columns, but to get anything in the report filter you have to click and drag. In any case, I'll show you that in just a second. Let's go ahead and start checking our fields, like salesperson, check that, boom. Adds it over here in the pivot table, and also adds it down below as a row label. Here's all my rows, right? The labels for the rows. Let's go ahead and check the order date, the name of the product, and also the quantity sold. And you can see we've got this hierarchical structure down below for my row labels. I've got the salesperson on top, then I have the date down below, and then the product below that. Now, is there a right or wrong way in how this sorts it? No, you can change it. If you don't want to have the date and then the product down below, just come down here, click on product and drag it up in between salesperson and date. So now you have it reversed. So you have the product up on top and then the sales date down below. So really it's what you want to see and how you want to organize it. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag it back because I liked it that way. And then you'll notice that there's our first field, which is the quantity that contains all numerical values. Now you can customize these fields. For example, over here in the pivot table, I don't like sum of quantity. The reason why it says that is because, well, first of all, it gives us all the quantity, but then it, by default, wants to sum it up. For example, January 15th, 2008, we have all the quantities there, and if you click and drag, the sum of that is 51. And then for Bob Appleman, you've got 19 plus 51, which is the total for Bob Appleman, for those quantities sold for all these dates down below. So in any case, if you want to make those changes, come down here if you want to make it for, let's say, the sum of quantity, click on the drop-down arrow and go to Value Field Settings, and you can change the name. Instead of sum of quantity, you can say total quantity or something to that effect. You can't name it just quantity, because if you do and you click OK, it'll say, oh, we already have that name over here in the field list, so give it some other name. And then if you want to change the number format, like let's say you have currency or you want decimal places, go ahead and click on number format, and there's number, your decimals, currency, go ahead and select it, click OK, and then like I said, the default is sum. You can choose if you want to be able to count or average. I'll go over average and the minimum maximum because there's something you need to look out for. I'll do that later, but for right now we changed the name and we applied the currency format, click OK, And there we go. Total quantity and then currency, which that doesn't go for quantity. Let me go ahead and hit undo. But you can make those changes without going back into your database and making the changes or applying them here. You can actually have the front end look different than your back end without touching the back end with a little tweak or customization. Now I'm looking at my pivot table and I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to see all the salespeople. I just want to pull them up one at a time or filter them one at a time, the operative word being filter. Now you can organize this in different ways. You've got your row labels here that you can click on, your filtering options for all your salespeople. Go ahead and check and uncheck. Let me click cancel of who you want to see, who you don't want to see. If you want to go ahead and modify the fields, for example, I don't want my salesperson to be in the row labels. I want it as the page filter. You could click and drag and move salesperson up into the page or report filter. Adds it up at the top, removes it from the main body down below. And that way you get your row labels that you can go ahead and, filter by date if you want to, order date. In addition, you can also click on the salesperson and filter by them as well. Where before, when we just left the salesperson down here, we can only filter by them. Now that we move the salesperson up above, we can filter by the order date as well as the salesperson. So click on the drop down arrow, choose one, click OK. If you want to select multiple salesperson, then go ahead and check this box and it opens up and allows us to check more than one. But the bad thing about that is, let me go ahead and uncheck all and then go ahead and check two of them, is that when you check two of them, click OK, it doesn't define which two or separate them and say, okay, this was Brett Hume or Bob Appelman. So let me go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and uncheck one, click OK. Now I know it's just strictly only Bob Appelman here. And you can see that little funnel. If you're like, I wonder if I have all the records being displayed. Well, look up above. If you got that little funnel, then you know it's being filtered based upon the salesperson field here. Now, you can also add a lot more filtering options up to the page or report filter. In other words, instead of just salesperson, I can also add the sales date, click and drag and move it up under salesperson. So now I get three filtering options. I have the salesperson, the date, click on the drop down arrow, let me click off in a blank area, and you also have the row labels. So we get a lot more filtering options. Let me click cancel. Let me go ahead and click on the drop down arrow, uncheck Bob Appelman, let's do Homer Simpson, click OK. And so far, for all the dates that Homer made sales, we've got some of the quantity down below, but if I just want to say, well, let me go ahead and check multiple. Let me uncheck all. I just want to see the sales that he's made for, just January. I'll check those boxes and click OK and get the sum there. So he did pretty good in January. Aside from checking up here, you can also click and drag from the field list down below. So if I want to go ahead and click and drag company into the row labels, let me put the company above products. There we go. So now I can look at the company and say, okay, what has the company purchased from us? Lantern and Tiki Torches and Scouting and Sports, based upon the salesperson Homer Simpson here for the date range of January, purchased air mattress, day cots, and so on. Now you'll notice I've got a couple of filters being applied. Instead of clicking on the drop down arrow and rechecking all, and then coming in here clicking on the drop down arrow and checking all, the quickest way if you have two or more filters being applied to your pivot table is to come up here on the related contextual options tab, which by the way, if you click off of the pivot table, it's gone. Click back on it, it brings it back up. If you accidentally close out of here, you need to bring it back up. Make sure you have your pivot table selected. Come up here to the options tab, go to the show group, click on field list. If you need to clear multiple filters at once, come up here on the options tab, go to the actions group, click on the clear drop down arrow and say you want to clear filters. If you click clear all, you have to start over and start checking all your fields to add them to the pivot table. Let me go ahead and hit undo. I wanted to click clear to just clear the filters. And we're back to where we started, or at least there are no filters being applied. And then you have all these groups for the company and then their products. You have these little minus signs. When you click on them, it collapses them. So if you don't care about what they purchased and you just want to see the total quantity that they purchased from you, then you can either click on that minus sign and click on the plus sign to expand it back open, or come back up here on the options tab to the active field group and click on the minus sign to go ahead and collapse all of them. Click on the plus sign to expand them all. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month, you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.